Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt Foundation's podcast, your guide to the fundamentals of better deer hunting. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light, go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Tony Peterson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Wired to Hunt Foundation's podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. I'm your host, Tony Peterson. Today I'm going to talk about one of the most underrated aspects of whitetail hunting, understanding deer browse. Hunters talk a lot about browse, but it's always kind of like in passing. I mean, how often do you hear about someone who killed a big buck on a browse pattern? Maybe. This is a big maybe. If you follow some big woods buck hunters, you'll hear mention of browse, but it's pretty unlikely to hear anyone credit browse with their buck kills in most places. Destination food sources and food plots. But the truth is, deer have a crazy diverse diet, and understanding your local browse options can help you kill more deer, which is what this episode is all about. While I'm not as hyped up to kill turkeys with a shotgun as I used to be, I still love it. I think I love the satisfaction of calling a bird into my decoys and arrowing it at 7 yards like a tiny bit more. But there's no denying that a day spent running and gunning for longbeards is a day well spent. Now this can be accomplished at any given day in the spring, obviously, at least when the season's open. But for me, if I'm going to carry a shotgun and put my back to a tree, there's a timing consideration that I always try to get right if I can. You see, many of the states I hunt for turkeys are pretty far north. This means that in the early season, which I guess we could probably call, all of April, at least up here, just to make things easier. During that time, the food sources, they're real predictable. The birds are going to be out scratching in agricultural fields. They'll root around in the leaf litter for acorns, often red oak acorns where I live, because most of the white oak acorns got eaten up a long time ago. Those birds will also go digging around in the swamps for some kind of early emergent plant that I have yet to really figure out. And actually, honestly, I don't even know if it's a plant. They might be digging up snails or something for all I know. What I do know is, about the first week when I'm hearing toads and frogs really chirping away in the backyard pond, I know I'm going to go out and watch turkeys work the edges of swamps. In fact, I often see deer do this too, and I doubt they're eating snails. Once April is in the rearview mirror, then I start to get excited about the prospect of running and gunning for turkeys. This is because it's usually warm enough for the plants to start budding out. There's usually some really consistent insect activity at that point. And I'd think after 5 or 6 months of no fresh salad and no buggy delicacies, the turkeys, they're going to split up if they were still flocked up, and they're going to hit these new food sources hard. And they often go from being super visible in the fields to being far less visible. which simply means that they're in the woods. And for some reason, a reason I can't really explain, I love setting up in the woods to call in gobblers. It's so fun to hear them sound off and to know they are coming, but not be able to see them till they're damn near within shotgun range already. Then you just catch that glimpse of a fan in the brush or a redhead bobbing through the woods, and it's so sweet. It's also pretty damn reliable in my experience. In other words, the transition of food sources, it's going to happen during turkey season at some point. And when it does, I know that I'm going to get out and try to shoot one in the face with my 12 gauge in the woods. Now, if this sounds like something I'm making up, do yourself a favor. If you happen to shoot a bird when the woods are really greening up and you're worried about, being carried off by ticks by that point, dissect his crop. While the toms don't eat as much as the hens do throughout the spring, which is why, if you want to shoot a real heavyweight like a 28 pounder, you're going to want to do it in early spring versus later. They do still eat all season long. They're not going to pass up a quick snack while they're in the midst of their lusty strutting and gobbling, across the landscape looking for a girlfriend. And if you do cut open their crop, you'll probably see some fresh leaves and often some kind of bugs. Sometimes those insects will still be moving, which you'd think would have to be kind of a weird feeling for the birds, although they're probably used to it and probably like it. Anyway, I'll bet if you could figure out how to do it, you could shoot deer in at least September and October and, probably much later farther south. And you'd see all kinds of interesting plants in their stomach. I'll bet the diversity of that would rival any gobbler in the spring. In fact, this with deer has been studied quite a bit. The fine folks at the Mississippi State University Deer Ecology and Management Lab, they have studied this. So have other researchers. And the findings are fascinating. But for starters, it pays to understand not only what whitetails eat, but why they do it. They seem to have filled an ecological hole that other ungulates like elk, moose, and even cattle just didn't fill for whatever reason. Those grass grazers, they got a far different diet than the whitetail. Deer are highly specialized feeders. You can understand this just by looking at their long, slender snout and their tongue. This allows them to nibble on really small parts of plants, really specific parts of plants, instead of just wholesale mowing down on huge mouthfuls of grass. They also have super active salivary glands, which produce enzymes that help them break down and deactivate certain plant compounds like tannins, which are found in food sources like those red oak acorns I mentioned earlier. Their gastrointestinal tract further aids them in eating foods other critters can't, allowing them to fulfill their energy requirements from a variety of plants. How big of a variety, you might ask? Well, in one study of southeastern whitetails, they were shown to eat over 400 species of plants. Now, keep in mind, that's just what they documented during the study, and probably undershoots the total amount of plants that deer can eat, maybe by a lot. Of course, just because deer can and do eat hundreds of different kinds of plants throughout the year, doesn't mean they do so equally. In another study, researchers noted that their subjects ate over 140 different species of plants, but just 1/3 of those plants made up 93% of the deer's diet. And this brings up an interesting thing about whitetails, even if it really doesn't have any bearing on how you'll hunt them better. They are constantly testing out food sources, likely to figure out, how palatable they are and what kind of nutritional value they offer. And this probably hits a fever pitch for deer from the months of May through, maybe September or October, when the most browse is available to them. In fact, it has been shown that browse and forbs are the most important forages for deer, providing over 80% of their diet, at least until fall. So as summer progresses, their diet starts to move towards soft mass. And then during the fall, it ratchets up to hard mass. But the browse, still a very real part of their diet and a huge component of their ability to stay well-fed, healthy, and survive the winter. Okay, so you've gotten a science lesson, a biology lesson, and some super exciting facts to whet your appetite. But what does this mean to you as a hunter? Well, I don't know. Basically, it means that you should probably think about how browse could play into your hunting strategy. Let me give you an easy example of this. Forestry or logging. If you're a big woods hunter, or really you hunt anywhere where old growth forests might, meet the chainsaws at some point and the sun might get to hit the forest floor in a meaningful way after a couple of decades of being blocked out by the canopy, you know a couple of things. The first is that fresh clear cuts, they look nothing like old growth forests. Aside from the obvious changes, like most of the big trees are gone, the ground cover just explodes. Nature is a quick eraser, and this is never more clear than when you watch a section of forest that has been logged start to suddenly mature. The variety of plant life that springs up is always impressive. Often, we only pay attention to fresh clear cuts when they start to grow up just a little bit because they provide excellent security cover for whitetails. They're also the best places to find rough grouse a lot of times if that's your thing. But it's not just the security of a thick, fresh clear cut that draws deer in. There are a couple other factors. For one, there's almost always an edge created in this scenario. And you know that I know and love to talk about how much deer love edges. But what matters here for this podcast is the browse. A section that has been recently logged is going to offer browse that the deer just cannot get in older growth forests. Now, I've spent quite a bit of my time hunting big woods deer, and I'll tell you that nothing gets me to change my plans faster than when I run across a fresh clear cut. I know that it might play into my plans for 10 years or more, to be honest. They're that good and that valuable to the deer. But what if you don't live in the North Country or, some of the huge pine plantations down south, the big wood swamps down there? Browse can still be key. I'll give you another example. When I last drew an Iowa tag, which is about as not big woodsy type of hunting as you can get, I spent my first full day covered in deer on public land. Now, this land offered the deer more than the private land does. In addition to woods, meadows, and river bottoms, it has state planted food plots and is checkerboarded between private farms that are, mostly agricultural fields. If you were to draw up a perfect deer scenario type of region, this area would serve pretty well as inspiration. Now, during my opening morning sit, when I eventually hit and lost the biggest buck of my life that I'm going to talk about a lot because it still stings, I watched several bucks and does leave a private alfalfa field. When they got to my side of the fence, they spent some time looking around. Some of them eventually just headed off to go straight to their bedding, but others hit the edge of the meadow and they really started browsing. They'd pick and nibble their way along and then dive into the woods for a while, picking and nibbling along their way there. Then they'd break back out into the meadow. It was awesome and a really good lesson. The destination food source was definitely a part of their daily routine. It was far from their only source of calories. And since I could hunt the browse, but I couldn't hunt where they were coming from the destination food source, that browse, that little pattern around the meadow became even that much more important. Now, later that evening, when I scrambled to set up to mostly observe a river bottom flat that had probably, has 4 feet of flowing water in it right now, I watched a whole parade of does and fawns. They all browsed their way through the river bottom, which if you hunt river bottoms as much as I do, you know how much they love that. I'd bet quite a bit of money that there is some sort of microhabitat situation going on in floodplains that promotes certain kinds of plant growth, and that the deer know there's good stuff to nibble on there. In fact, one of the primary plants I find in those situations are nettles, which, suck to walk through, but you know what? The deer eat the crap out of them somehow. Maybe it's like when we eat a ghost pepper. I don't know. Another super annoying plant that deer are prone to chomping on is multiflora rose. These thorny bitches are an invasive species that is despised by farmers and ranchers and just a healthy population of landowners overall. It's also on the menu for whitetails and grows in plenty of different places, which also provides pretty dang good bedding cover in addition to browse. Now, I could list more specific type of plants that deer browse, but it doesn't matter because you guys live all over the place. And what that means is that you have to learn what is in your region at least to some extent, and then try to understand what would be valuable to the deer when you're hunting them. This is most easily, although I'll admit it's not really that easy, to accomplish two different ways. The first is to scout and look for nipped off plants. I guess that is kind of easy. When the local deer are really keying in on a specific food source, it's pretty obvious. Now, if you do this now, you'll get a chance to see what the deer eat in the spring, which might not be of much use to you for your fall hunting. But as the summer progresses and you get out to put up some trail cameras or maybe spend some time on the spotting scope, you have the opportunity to dial in some browse intel. Again, maybe you're hiking into a secluded spot like a pond to hang your camera, and wherever you put it is going to allow you the chance to look at some greenery for signs of browsing on the way in and out. When you're glassing, you actually have a better chance to figure out what deer like to browse on. Remember when I mentioned watching those deer in Iowa browsing along a meadow? Well, when you spend time glassing summertime deer in fields, you see the exact same behavior. I mean, it's crazy how often you can watch a bachelor group head out into the alfalfa or soybeans or whatever, where they're going to definitely feed for a while. But often, they'll start to ping pong their way back into the cover and then out of it. I watched a pile of deer do this back in 2015 at the back end of a bean field. And when I snuck in there to hang a stand, I found a bunch of wild grapes growing there where many of the bucks seemed to disappear to. On the second night of the season, when the wind was right, I slipped into that stand. 2 little bucks showed up first, and then they were joined by a much bigger 8-pointer. While I managed to grunt him in, it also just happened to be that the 2 youngsters paraded right over to me and started browsing on the field edge. I saw them eating some of those grapes, but I also saw them browsing on something else that was in there. I don't know what it was, but it didn't matter. Eventually, that bigger deer followed them in, and when he got to 20 yards, he made my whole season awful short and awful sweet. Of course, this example involves a destination food source and soft mast and some field edge browse. But that's better than focusing on just a single type of food. The more things your stand sites have going for them, the better. Like having a river crossing that is a natural funnel while also being a water source. And hell, maybe it leads up to a fence crossing. That means that you really have 3 things working for you instead of 1 in a given spot. I like those types of setups a lot. But what if you can't pin down a specific type of browse that should be hot during a specific part of the season? Well, go back 2 weeks and listen to the episode I put out about where bucks like to travel. In it, I talk a lot about security cover and how they stick to the thick stuff, but also gravitate toward edges. If you just want to find browse without getting too specific, edge cover is probably your ticket. Where 2 types of habitat meet, you'll often have the chance for very specific types of greenery. This might be an old homestead in a bigger woodlot. It might just be an overgrown fence row. Or it might be where a floodplain meets a little bit higher ground. These types of spots exist all over the country, all over where deer live. And it's almost a guarantee that no matter where you hunt, there is an edge pattern to work with. And often the edge pattern is good because of multiple factors. It might be a type of cover that connects bigger woodlots, or it just might be a little bit thicker than the surrounding area. It might offer ideal sized saplings to rub, or, just a good place to lay down some sign. Or maybe it just coincides with the best, safest travel routes. But no matter what, it's also very, very likely to contain some browse. And there's one more thing I want to say on this before I wrap it up. I've been preaching a lot about paying attention. It's just plain old good advice, but there's something else to say on it. Pay attention to what the deer browse on when you're hunting them. Take note of what the does nibble on and the little bucks. Observe the deer, because what they nibble on as they pass through on their way back to bed in the morning, that's going to tell you an awful lot about what they're interested in eating from year to year to year. And file that away in the old memory bank. What the deer eat during a certain week in the fall this year, they may very well eat the same week next year. What a forky finds delicious tonight, a 140-incher might not be able to resist tomorrow. Watch them work through the woods and pay special attention to deer that seem to concentrate on a specific tiny little patch of woods, because there's probably some browse right there that they're really on. Whatever they are all gravitating toward, to you, it's pretty important. being a hunter. Don't be afraid to either go set up over it or at least walk over and take a closer look to dig in. What you find might serve you extremely well in the next few days or the next 20 seasons. That's it for this week, my friends. I'm Tony Peterson. This has been the Wired to Hunt Foundation's podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you want some more whitetail advice, head on over to themeateater.com/wired, and you can see a ton of hunting articles written by hunting experts on all kinds of things. Hunting styles, tactics, strategies, understanding other food sources, all kinds of good stuff. Go check it out.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.